Neighbor stole my electricity and water. Claims old owner gave permission. My wife Aria and I recently moved into our new home. She has always been in love with all things vintage, so a huge old house like this was our dream. We were lucky to find this place, especially for the price we got it at. One of my friends inherited the house from his grandfather after his passing and he urgently needed quick cash. Selling it to us meant he could still come by whenever he missed his grandfather. The neighborhood that it was located in was also fantastic. Everything we could possibly need was located nearby, and the neighbors were friendly. Most of them at least. Of course, nothing is ever perfect. Anyway, it took us no time at all to figure out that our immediate neighbor was someone most people chose to steer clear of. She lived there alone with her Pomeranian that loved to bark at everyone. She was the type of person that would complain about a baby crying for 5 minutes because it meant her dog could not sleep. This was despite the fact that the baby was only crying because her Pomeranian spent half the day barking really loudly. In other words, she was what people refer to as a real Karen. Normally I would have felt bad for how everyone went out of their way to make sure that they did not run into Karen. But I drew the line at anyone being rude to Aria, my wife. I usually ignore the odd looks we get for being a mixed-race couple. I cannot stand it whenever anyone is racist to her, despite the fact that she is the kindest soul I've ever met. When we first moved in, she decided to bake cakes for our neighbors as a sign of goodwill, but Karen refused to accept it, claiming her stomach cannot handle Mexican food. Aria tried explaining that it was just a regular cake so her stomach would be perfectly fine. But she insisted that accepting food from a Latina was too risky. By the way, I might agree here. It is too risky in a sense that the food might be too delicious and you don't ever want to eat anything else again. But anyway, after that incident we made it a point to stay away from her, but she made that very hard. A couple of weeks after we got settled in, I went down to the living room from our bedroom and almost had a heart attack when I noticed someone sitting on our couch. It was pretty late in the night and Aria was in bed, so it couldn't have been her. I approached the couch cautiously from behind and once I got close enough I realized it was just Karen. The problem was that neither of us had invited her over. She casually had her feet up on the coffee table, and when I asked her what she was doing here, she nonchalantly informed me that she had to turn on a switch here and now she was just waiting for her pool to get heated. She then proceeded to get up and walk towards the main door, claiming it should be hot enough now. I was too stunned to say anything. Before I could come back to my senses to ask why she would need to turn on a switch in my house, and what does that have to do with her pool, she was gone. The first time I chalked it up as a dream and let it go, but Aria and I ran into her a few more times at our own house. Each time she would just pretend like it was completely normal, and we were the weird ones for thinking anything is wrong. The third time this happened I could swear I locked the front door and double-checked. She had me questioning my sanity. Finally I decided to go up to her house and ask her what all this was about. She told me that the previous owner had left her a key to the garage because some of the water line in her house began from ours. This did not make any sense to me, but she insisted that this was how the water pipes in old houses worked. I left even more confused than I was in the beginning, but that conversation felt so draining that I couldn't press her any further. I decided to ignore it and go about my day, but this proved to be a horrible decision at the end of the month. When we took a look at our water bill and electricity bill, we were dumbstruck. It was ridiculously high, considering we were just 2 people. Additionally, we always made it a point to turn off lights when we don't need them. An Aria was passionate about conserving wildlife, which meant no water wastage either. It did not take us too long to figure out that the only other person who would tamper with our switches and water is Karen. We rushed over immediately to demand an explanation. She insisted that this is how it has always been. I could not understand why the previous tenant allowed her to steal his water and electricity for her heated pool when he got nothing in return. We tried asking the other neighbors about this, but most of them did not know that the old man living here before us was paying for Karen too. Lastly, we asked the elderly woman who lived opposite Karen and it turned out that she was blackmailing him. The previous owner had inherited the house from his father and he was not very well educated. Once his wife passed away and he too grew old, Karen convinced him that he had essentially committed tax evasion, and that he could easily be sentenced to jail for this. It was true that he did not pay taxes, but he also was not making enough to be mandated to pay taxes. I called my friend who I bought the house from and asked him for as much information as possible about his grandfather. I even managed to get my hands on his old bill. Once I collected enough evidence to prove that she was exploiting the poor old man who lived here before, we took this straight to the concerned authorities. The fact that Aria's sister was a lawyer certainly came in handy. She helped us sue Karen for not just stealing our resources for her pool, but also for trespassing. The first thing we did was to get a restraining order against Karen. The next part of the case took much longer, but we had the support of everyone in the neighborhood. Somehow, each of them had a Karen story and they were all internally glad that they would never have to deal with her again. Again, I need to reiterate that most people here were really nice, but even they could not deal with her any longer. It was not an easy case to fight against, but Karen's bad reputation flipped the tables to our side. It was impossible for her to hide the fact that she exploited a senior citizen any longer. Once she was finally locked up, Aria and I could breathe again, knowing that no one would trespass onto our property anymore without us knowing. Story 2. So let me tell you a tale of two punk-ass dumbbells and their crappy parents. To really set the stage though, allow me to talk about these two geniuses and their friends. So they were part of a group of around 10 kids aged between 12 and 15. These kids were your typical group of young British yops who always spent their time together committing various degrees of criminal mischief and occasionally crossing a line to more serious crime. Now, the reason I paint you this picture is so you know that no matter what you read next, you know I'm not the a-hole. So I'm a delivery driver for Uber Eats and I drive a motorbike. It's a big all bike for sure, despite only being a 500cc bike. So I park up at a popular spot for both the delivery drivers who work there and the yobs who terrorize the locals. By the way, for all the Americans listening, have you ever heard the term yobs? Seems like a very British term to me, but I could be wrong. Anyway, I went into the nearby KFC to pick up another order for the night. As I do, two of these core decided that they like my bike, so much so that they wanted to see if they could play a real-life version of GTA, and my bike was the vehicle of choice. So I am in the KFC waiting for the order and they are jumping on the bike thinking it would be easy. Well, one guy sticks a penknife into my ignition barrel on the bike and starts the engine. One of the other drivers pops his head in and shouts, "Hey, Opus, someone is trying to steal your bike." I immediately ran outside just in time to watch the kid in the driver's seat kick off the side stand. Now, here's the thing. When you ride a motorcycle, you need to plant a foot on the ground to support the weight of the bike before pushing off. You need to set the gears and it's impossible to do so and not keep a foot on the ground. So he's got himself an alien passenger on the back, both with no helmets and on a bike that weighed 4 or 5 times himself. Between himself and the bike and his friend, it was easily 300 kilograms he needed to hold up, and because he didn't know what he was doing, the second he kicked off the side stand it toppled over on him. His friend was thrown off the bike and cracked his head open, and he had his leg and half his torso crushed under 225 kilograms of biking metal. The second that he dropped, his fellow yobs booked it down the street and abandoned him and his friends. I called the police and an ambulance while canceling my KFC order pickup. I checked on the friend and his head was gushing. The police had gotten good at responding to the yobs because of how much trouble they were in. In context, they had responded and moved these kids over 120 times in under a month for a whole litany of crimes ranging from trespassing to GBH, serious assaults if you're American. In the past week, they had responded to 10 different vandalism calls and 6 GBH cases. So they see these two geniuses on the ground and me doing my best to use a wad of napkins as a makeshift bandage to hold the blood in. Police then ask me what happened and I say, they tried stealing my bike and found out it's not the same as the video games. They don't know it yet, but I'm pressing charges and they are facing consequences this time. I was not really bothered about being nice, as they did try stealing my living and my pride and joy. The cops looked stunned by my disregard for the fact that they were dealing with two young people who were seriously injured. And the following conversation ensues. Cop number 1 asked, "Are you sure you want to do that? They are injured and they are just kids after all." Me with a stern look, I said, "Yes, their age does not negate the fact that they committed serious crimes." Cop number 2 pleaded, "But you might screw up their lives." Me, "They don't go to school, they commit crimes on the daily and all you do is issue ASBOs, which is apparently an anti-social behavior order. It's now time for a few real consequences. Do your job and start reading them their rights." The cops did not like my tone but understood my anger and proceeded to read the kid under the bike his rights as the ambulance pulled up. They obviously tended to the unconscious kid first, and then one broke off to help the police tend to the kid that was under the bike. As they do, their parents, who had been alerted to the situation after the police called them, showed up driving pretty recklessly and parking in a bus stop. They then run in, look at the yob in pain and his friend unconscious. The father asks, "Why are you arresting them?" "They are just being stupid kids. We will pay for the damage, I swear." I state, "I am having them charged because they are not gonna learn any other way. You are also paying for the damage regardless of the outcome of this day anyway." The father then says, "I will only pay for the damages if you drop the charges." Cop number 1 goes, "Sir, I would advise you to pay for the damages. It might help him at sentencing." The mother then pipes up and goes, "How much time could he get without us paying?" 4 years easily, I stated. The mother went pale. She started blubbering, going, "Why can't you let him go? He is just a kid. He is also a criminal and needs to face the consequences of his actions." "For once at least," I replied. Now the phrase I hated the most was, "They are just kids." It did nothing but piss me off. Where I grew up, if you screwed up, you owned it and took the step to make amends. No excuses, even if you were just a kid. In my book, the excuse was nothing but a cop-out and the reason that these Yorps and their friends felt emboldened to commit non-stop serious crimes. It was the cheapest form of entitlement, and these kids needed to learn a lesson once and for all. In the end, the kid who was unconscious was charged as an accessory to all the crimes of his cohort after waking up from a week-long coma. The other kid was charged with theft of a motor vehicle and vandalism after he got out of the hospital with a broken leg. That was before police started taking complaints in the dozen about them and their friends, all of which were promptly rounded up and charged too. The parents paid for the damages to the bike to help reduce their sentencing, and tried arguing that the kid had done enough to appease the law. In total, the kid who tried driving my motorcycle got 2 years in juvenile detention with a 3-year probation. The kid in the coma got 6 months with 18 months probation. The rest of the kids got anything ranging from 100 hours of community service to 4 years in juvenile detention based upon the amount of crimes they were charged with. Between 10 of them, they racked up a grand total of 127 charges that they pleaded down to 3 charges each. Now some might think that I was harsh in all of this, but 2 years on, and the 2 kids who once tried stealing my bike were going to school finally. They apologized genuinely for their criminality and are doing better. So all in all, they learned their lesson and they were set to try and succeed more despite their past behavior. Moral of the story is, when you excuse bad behavior, it allows for entitled behavior. When you punish it, it can stop people from acting worse before they cross serious lines. Story 3. I, a 23 male, lived with my girlfriend Anne, a 22-year-old female, and my dog Bo. Recently, Anne's brother, Al, a 25 male, got laid off from work and could not afford to pay rent anymore. Anne asked if Al could stay with us and I didn't see why not. Anne is not on speaking terms with her parents and I assumed Al probably also wasn't and didn't have another place to go. Plus, I really loved Anne and I wanted to show her how important she was to me. Here is the issue. Anne told me I had a mild dog allergy. When I initially spoke with both of them, I said I would do my best to accommodate them but would not under any circumstances get rid of Bo. Both understood and El said his allergy was not too bad. El moved in and to be honest, he was not a great roommate. He did not seem to be in a hurry to move out as he spent most of his time sleeping and playing video games instead of looking for work. He did not pitch in for chores and let laundry pile up in his room and then acted confused when I told him he had to do his own laundry. He ate the food we cooked but did not help with cooking or buying groceries. The worst is he ordered lots of fast food for himself and left wrappers, bags and old food in his room, which made the whole apartment smell bad. After a month or so, El said his allergies were getting worse and asked me to consider putting Bo in a shelter. I said absolutely not, but Anne said we should consider getting rid of Bo to accommodate her brother's needs. I said no and we would not be discussing this further. She called me the a-hole for choosing my dog over my family. And that is when I snapped. I said Elle is not family and has been nothing but a hassle for the past month, and if she wants to babysit her older brother, she can find her own place. She has no legal right to stay here because my name is on the lease and I pay rent. Anne is in grad school and does not make enough money to afford a decent apartment on her own. She tried again to convince me that I should prioritize Elle over Bo, so I gave her an ultimatum. Either Elle is gone in 24 hours or I kick both of them out. Bo stays no matter what. Both have since moved out, and while Anne and I are not officially broken up, I have not heard from her in a few days. I know this may sound harsh, but Bo is my family. He has been with me through some of my hardest times and he is a rescue, which means he was already abandoned once and I will not let that happen again. I feel nothing for Elle, and while I thought I loved Anne, her willingness to get rid of someone I love as much as her made my feelings change. When I explained this to my parents and sister, however, they said I should have at least considered getting rid of Bo to accommodate Elle, and that they could even take care of Bo themselves so he didn't have to go to a shelter. They said if I saw Anna's family, which I did at one point, I should be able to make sacrifices. But that was a sacrifice I was not willing to make. Does that make me in a hole? In addition, I realized I used both Amy and Anne for my girlfriend's name. None of them are her real name. Sorry for the confusion. Update. Holy crap, I was not expecting this. Thanks for the support. A lot has happened in the past couple of days and I want to share that with you. So first, I officially broke up with N. My parents have since apologized to me. Apparently they did not realize the extent of my living situation with N and L and thought I would only be getting rid of Bo for a few weeks. They even gave me money for changing my locks and installing a fancy security system. Lastly, this whole experience made me think there are many dogs out there who have been cast aside for reasons similar to this. So not only am I keeping Bo, but I am planning on adopting a second dog from a local shelter. My next girlfriend will be told up front that I'm a dog over so kind of guy. And the user in the comments said, not the a hole, everything you said was accurate. Honestly, you are all not together anymore. Kicking her out was breaking up with her, and good for you. She is clearly heartless to consider putting your dog in a shelter for a lame roommate who could have taken an allergy pill. And another commenter said, not the a hole, if she loves you, she would have never asked you to get rid of your dog. She is prioritizing her brother over you and your feelings. You're probably better off just moving on and finding someone else who wants the same things out of life. And by the way, your family is also wrong and I'm honestly not sure why they would take her side. Some people just don't care as much about animals, which is very sad. Animals are better than most people I have met.